Tonight, Roger Corman and David Del Valle will discuss the films he made of Edgar Allan Poe at the Aero Theater here in Santa Monica.
No.
Say 1, 2, 3.
1, 2, 3.
There.
All right, do you want to take one of yours?
Yes. Here, Roger. There you go.
No, wait, that's not.
So what are you up to? Rikers Island, that's very cool.
Rikers Island,
I know. I got the picture.
that's
What is that? Where did you get that?
Mr. Roger Corman is here. And without further ado, I'd like to bring him down. Mr. Corman. Big hand. It's so nice of you to come down here with us to celebrate the career and the fabulous personality of Vincent Price. Perhaps we could begin by you kind of telling us about your relationship with him. You made something like 8 films with him, starting with The House of Usher through The Tomb of Ligeia. So yours was a very happy relationship, and he had a lot of respect for you, I know. When he and I have talked, he really enjoyed making these films.
I enjoyed them too. Vincent was a great gentleman. I had chosen him originally for The Fall of the House of Usher, for the character of Roderick Usher, the lead in the picture. Roderick Usher was a very cultivated New England gentleman of great sensitivity. He was always very sensitive.
To light.
To light, and sometimes to sound. We varied that sensitivity from picture to picture. But Vincent was a brilliant actor and a delight to work with.
He told me that on Usher there was one scene that involved an axe that was made out of rubber. But when Mark Damon, who was very much a method actor, as Vincent would say, he said he came running into the room and screamed, "Usher!" and threw the axe, and it went right into Vincent's knee. And Vincent, for one moment, was not Roderick Usher anymore. Do you remember that?
I remember that. He may not have been Roderick Usher, but speaking of method acting, it was a brilliant method, natural reaction.
Well, he said that Mark was so proud of being able to cry on cue, and Vincent said, "You know, I wouldn't do that if I were you. If you keep doing that, you're going to dry up." And Vincent said, "I was so pleased when we first shot the scene by Madeline's tomb. He had to use glycerin because he'd run out of tears."
Well, this is a problem because Mark was a method actor, and my training was primarily with actors with the method as well. And I've noticed this on a number of films, that if you're working truly with the method and you're trying to give an honest emotional portrayal, very often you will give it in the long shot. For instance, normally you'll shoot a scene, you'll give the long shot, the medium shot, over shoulder, close-up, and so forth. And very often the emotion runs out by the time you've come to the close-up. And you have to be very careful in working with actors that they retain enough emotion for the close-up. Now, Vincent, being very experienced and knowing something about the method, was always able to do that.
He had just before House of Usher worked with William Castle, and he made 2 films that we're going to see tomorrow night at the Egyptian, which is The House on Haunted Hill and The Tingler. Now, both of those movies Vincent did in a percentage basis, and House on Haunted Hill, he made a lot of money. And he said to me, you know, by being in those pictures, I was given the privilege and the opportunity to take a chance on something I believed in, which was Edgar Allan Poe, and the deal that was offered him by AIP to star in, well, Usher, and then, of course, after Pitt. But as you told me once, this was never a series. Each picture was an entity unto itself, and then you would decide to make another one. there was never a moment, well, after 4 of them, you probably thought, I must be on a roll here.
That's true. I never really intended to make a series of Edgar Allan Poe pictures. I simply wanted to make The Fall of the House of Usher. When it did well, they asked me to do another, and as a matter of fact, referring to the film you're going to see after this, my choice after The Fall of the House of Usher was Mask of the Red Death, but I had seen the Ingmar Bergman picture, The Seventh Seal, and The Seventh Seal has some similarities to Poe's picture, Mask of the Red Death, and I felt if I do Mask, they'll say I copied Ingmar Bergman, although Mask was written 100 years earlier. So I chose The Pit and the Pendulum and did The Pit and the Pendulum, a number of other pictures, and finally, because each one did well, they asked me to do another. And finally, I had run out of what I thought were the best Edgar Allan Poe stories, and I said, I don't care if they think I'm copying Ingmar Bergman. I'm going back to Mask of the Red Death, because I think that and Usher are really his 2 greatest stories.
Well, speaking of Mask of the Red Death, this was a picture that was written by Charles Beaumont instead of Richard Matheson. And Charles Beaumont was a wonderful writer, as we know. And I thought it was brilliant because he took the story of all the ones you did. Mask of the Red Death had more of a story to it by Poe. And the stroke of genius that Charles Beaumont had was to make Prince Prospero a devil worshiper, which was a decidedly Charles Beaumont-ish kind of angle. And then R. Wright Campbell brought in Hop Frog, and you had had success in taking The Cask of Amontillado and The Black Cat, which is, I've always loved that segment in Tales of Terror, because Peter Lorre had been in semi-retirement, and you brought him out, and he and Vincent Price had chemistry that just went on for, I mean, how can you forget lines like, what kind of a man are you? You make love to my wife and won't even talk to me. You know? And what was he like? I envy you knowing him so much, because he just sounds, and he must have been incredible to spend time with. What do you remember about Peter Lorre on that first film?
Peter Lorre's background was different from Vincent. Vincent had trained he had gone to the Yale School of Drama and the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art, RADA, in London, and he was trained very much as a classical actor. Peter came out of Germany, had worked with Bertolt Brecht, and was very much into the German version of the Stanislavski method, which was very close to the American version. And their styles were distinctly different, but they were both intelligent and very sensitive actors, and they were able to work together very well, and particularly in the wine tasting sequence. They were really good because Vincent, they blended their styles, but in that one I said, in that scene, I said, let's go back to the origins. Peter, it is totally improvisational, you're off the wall in this scene, and Vincent, you are totally classical in the scene. And I wasn't here earlier to see it, but when the film first came out, that sequence got a great reaction from the audience.
Well, I've seen some photographs. You obviously hired an expert wine taster, because all of that overdone kind of stuff was how you taste wine. And there's photographs of this gentleman on the set advising Vincent on how to hold the, I think they're supposed to spit it out, and there's another.
Yes. That was the point. Well, of course, I'm saying this to my family who was here. You've all seen the scene, but the point of it is that Vincent is a very traditional wine taster who sips the wine and then spits it out. Peter just takes the bottle and pours it all over his head. And I said to the semi-expert, whoever he may have been, I don't even